Amnesty International, one of the world's largest human rights organizations, decided that the Russian war against Ukraine could not be complete without them justifying the genocide. And it worked out just great. Co-founders and dozens of employees are publicly leaving the company, donors are withdrawing their donations, and regional offices are trying their best to distance themselves from the central organization. Meanwhile, we are only 1 week into this shit show. By the way, now is the best time to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are not from Ukraine. And if you are from Ukraine, the best thing you can do is to send this video to your Western friends, because maybe it's time for somebody to listen to the guys from Ukraine. In the past 6 months, Russia has waged a colonial genocidal war against Ukraine, committed numerous terrorist attacks and war crimes including mass killings, rape and torture. And Russia continues this list, now with horrible things like brutal mass executions of prisoners of war, which make ISIS look like Middle Eastern Dungeons and Dragons club. So Amnesty International had no choice but to intervene, investigate and present the report, which blames the Ukrainian military for Ukrainian civilian casualties.
Ukrainian forces have put civilians in harm's way by establishing bases and operating weapon systems in populated residential areas, including in schools and hospitals.
Yes, you heard it right. On the 4th of August, Amnesty issued a report which de facto justifies Russian strikes on Ukrainian civilians by stating that the blame is on Ukrainian soldiers who had the audacity to be present in Ukrainian cities, on Ukrainian land, defending it from an unprovoked foreign invasion. So Amnesty International woke up one morning and decided that war is terrible and that the best way to protect people is to surrender and not to fight. But who should submit and lay down the arms? Well, in Amnesty's logic, the aggressors can't do it, and therefore the victim must. The victim must surrender and everything will be just fine. Well, it seems that Amnesty deals with human rights in a way one deals with the bed bugs. But while the report title sounds weird for something which is formally not Russian propaganda, you might ask, well, if such a massive human rights NGO made a report, there should be something in it. Maybe Ukrainians are fighting wrongly indeed, because, you know, it couldn't be just pure lies and manipulation, right? Right? Nah, it could.
We have documented a pattern of Ukrainian forces putting civilians at risk and violating the laws of war when they operate in populated areas.
So a pattern, you say?
Not every Russian attack documented by Amnesty International followed this pattern, however.
Oh, so some Russian attacks are just aimed at civilians without this reasoning, right? Just a few. Several attacks, like these attacks at shopping malls full of people 500 kilometers from the front line. Or maybe these cities which were swept off the face of the earth by indiscriminate bombing. Maybe everyday rocket strikes on the whole territory of Ukraine do not follow this pattern. It's hard to say, because if you read this report, it seems that everything the Ukrainian army does is firing their guns from apartment buildings, supermarkets, bus stops and baby strollers, provoking innocent cosmic-brained Russians to fire back and kill civilians by accident, using such a delicate killing technique as artillery wall of fire. Amnesty mentioned some accounts of people saying that they saw the Ukrainian military staying and sometimes firing from residential areas, hospitals and schools without providing any substantial evidence or methodology they used. And of course, the report does not provide any context as to what happened in these cases. Because who needs context when you need to write a specific article with a particular accusation of a victim? Do you want to know the context? Here's the context. Ukraine is invaded by an army 20 times bigger in size and firepower. The Russian army is attacking Ukrainian cities and everybody inside, military and civilians. Russians don't give a fuck. Russian soldiers shouldn't rape civilians while their Met government gives them medals. And ordinary Russians are shooting videos claiming that Ukrainian children are Nazis and deserve to die. And Ukraine is trying its best to defend itself. Yes, the Ukrainian army fights in cities. Ukrainian soldiers often sleep inside public buildings that are becoming a war zone. Ukrainian soldiers stay in villages they defend from the invaders. Because, duh, wars cannot take place on some magic isolated floating island from Ghibli animation with sports referees giving red and yellow cards to participants. It's a fucking war and Ukraine is defending itself. Amnesty says that
being in a defensive position does not exempt the Ukrainian military from respecting international humanitarian law.
Which in many ways is true. What is also true is that being a huge international human rights organization does not exempt you from responsibility for lies and manipulations, which lead to actual civilian deaths. The outrage is coming not just from Ukrainians trying to defend themselves. Many respected humanitarian law scientists, politicians, and journalists are on the same page regarding this report, which is a fucking shame. Because defending your cities from the invader is not a crime, neither national nor international. No such law says that the army has to wait somewhere under the ground when the aggressor is taking your cities one by one. UN war crimes investigator specializing in civilian harm mitigation Marga Lasko is pretty clear on what the actual law says.
They got the law wrong. Protocol 1 states, militaries shall to the maximum extent feasible avoid locating military objects near populated areas. Ukraine can place forces in areas they are defending, especially in urban warfare. There is no requirement to stand shoulder to shoulder in a field. This isn't the 19th century.
The Ukrainian army still has to protect civilians, and they do it. It includes evacuation from the hottest areas of the war zone, because those are Ukrainian citizens, and everybody perfectly knows that it doesn't matter where the military is. Russia will carpet bomb every inch of a city it attacks. By the way, the Red Cross and the UN could also help with evacuation, but they are too busy being extremely concerned. But you see, it wasn't enough for Amnesty to misinterpret the law, equate the victim of genocide with the aggressor, or manipulate the facts claiming that something is a pattern without hard evidence. In order to make their accusation worth something, they decided to just, lie. Lie about the evacuation efforts by the Ukrainian military. The only problem is that in the same area where Amnesty International made their observations, there were other journalists who are, by mere coincidence, not full of shit. The Violent Times journalist Tom Much wrote,
I was in one of the locations mentioned in the Amnesty report, a school block in the under-fire city of Lysychansk, with Ukrainian soldiers as they offered an evacuation right to any civilian residents who wished to leave. 3 did, and we traveled with them as we returned to safer locations. I had reported this all at the time.
Oh, that's awkward. What's even more awkward are the people behind this report. Meet Donatella Rovera, Amnesty International's senior crisis researcher and a supervillain from the 80s Batman series. She was one of the report's authors and a memorable presence at the hotel on the front line, with a bunch of other journalists gave a glimpse at how this organization actually works. Caleb Larson, the Associated Press correspondent, met Rovera in Kramatorsk and had a wonderful conversation.
She argued with former French foreign legionnaires and Royal Marines that she had been to more conflict zones than them, combat veterans, and was more knowledgeable. She also refuted our own accounts of what we had seen during our reporting in the field, insisting that what we saw couldn't possibly be true. At one point, she clearly mixed up mortars and artillery, a shock for a conflict researcher with decades of experience.
What a fun person to talk to! Well, at least she's fit for an Uber driver position. What she's not fit for is to be any kind of military expert. However, it doesn't prevent her from acting like one. When journalists asked the lead Amnesty researchers what should Ukrainian soldiers do when Russia attacks the Ukrainian cities, the answer was,
they insisted that Ukrainians fighting in urban terrain must relocate to a forested area.
As if it's some Tekken tournament where you can pick a fighting stage. That's right, go to the forest, you stupid Ukrainians. You don't fit the image of an anti-colonial guerrilla warrior. And wear more rugs all over the body. And please, be in sepia, you are too HD for our prejudices. But if Ukrainians go to the forest, we'll have to deal with Amnesty accusing Ukrainian soldier of provoking wildfires and global warming by endangering trees. And Donatella Rovera does not only act as a military expert in private talks, she also does so in Western media, without any fucking doubt.
We're seeing this incredible, historic flow of weapons coming into Ukraine from the West, from the US and NATO countries. Do we have any sense as to where they're going?
We don't know. There is really no information as to where they're going at all.
And I'm really glad that you don't know where Ukrainian weapons go, because who the fuck are you to know and control Ukrainian military logistics, which is the most hidden secret today? Rovera acts more like a Russian undercover officer trying to get confidential information than a human rights activist. Because while this report might seem like some kind of a mistake, it is not. Different people who saw this report before its publication worried Amnesty that it was faulty. Even the head of the Ukrainian office of Amnesty said that she has repeatedly spoken with the top management, which ignored the local office, declined to cooperate with it, and didn't even want to ask the Ukrainian military for comment. But when Ukrainian Amnesty insisted, the global office made everything possible not to let the Ukrainian government respond. So, as a result, the only party which benefited from this report are the Russians, who call a military object anything they fire at. A shopping mall in the middle of the day, military object. 11 years child's dream to have a peaceful future, military object.
В Мариуполе украинские нацбаты, выгнав персонал и пациентов из роддома, оборудовали в нем огневые позиции.
Now, whenever Russians kill Ukrainians, they will have an official permission from one of the most prominent human rights organizations. What a time to be alive!
Russian state-sponsored media quoted the report to support Moscow's claim that Russia has only launched strikes on military targets during the war. The spokesperson for Russia's foreign ministry cited the Amnesty International assertions as proof that Ukraine was using civilians as human shields.
And when this report sparked some outrage, mainly from the people who might be killed because of it, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, Agnes Kalamard, tweeted this:
Ukrainian and Russian social media mobs and trolls, they are all at it today, attacking Amnesty investigations. This is called war propaganda, disinformation, misinformation. This won't dent our impartiality and won't change the facts.
So, who's the social media mob? The president of Ukraine accusing Amnesty of equating genocide victims with the aggressor and endangering the lives of Ukrainians. Head of the Ukrainian Amnesty office resigning in shame. Co-founder of Swedish branch of Amnesty leaving the organization because of this report and publicly denouncing these actions. Or maybe the Times, which called Amnesty International Putin's propagandists and asked everyone to stop donating to the organization, which endangers civilians and plays into the hands of fascist aggressors. And after so many people had voiced their legitimate outrage with Amnesty's manipulative report, Amnesty decided to apologize. Apologize that their impartial and absolutely perfect report caused some anger. What the actual fuck? And it's not even the most disgraceful part of this story. There is more. Amnesty International was initially established to combat violations of prisoners' rights, including prisoners of war. 5 days prior to this report's publication, Russians intentionally burned alive dozens of Ukrainians prisoners of war from Azovstal. Do you know how many materials Amnesty issued on this? 0. Or on filtration camps, basically concentration camps where Russians keep Ukrainian civilians from the occupied territories and torture them. 0. Or mass deportations or kidnappings of Ukrainian children and their relocation to remote parts of Russian Federation. 0 reports. And this behavior is enough to say that the main problem for this organization is not human rights violations. It is nations defending themselves from Russian aggression. This report and those actions of Amnesty's leadership must destroy the reputation of this organization once and for all. At least what's left of it. By the way, if you actually want to help Ukrainians, you can donate to United24. It is a main Ukrainian charity that spends money on the humanitarian and military needs of the Ukrainian people. And if you want to get deeper, there are numerous excellent local Ukrainian volunteer organizations which save people's lives every day. And they need more global support. Thanks.